3 million years ago, when the first groups of humans began appearing on Earth, our main character was one of them. At first glance, he looked just like any normal Australopithecus, but there was something different about him, something that made him unique compared to everyone else. His obsession for hunting was on a completely different level. Still, MC believed he was just like everyone else, but soon he realized something was seriously off. While the people around him were slowly growing old, weakening, and eventually dying, he never died at all, bro. No matter what happened, disease, accident, or animal attack, nothing affected him. Time passed. Generations came and went, but he stayed exactly the same. Actually, he did change a little. His body grew bigger, more muscular, and more powerful. In this never-ending timeline, hunting, fighting, and battling any worthy enemy became the sole purpose of his life. The curse of immortality and the unbearable pain of loneliness became his true companions, and strangely, they also gave him a bit of comfort. For about 3 million years he lived like this. Every day his body evolved a little more. His strength kept reaching new levels. Then one day he reached a point where no one could match his power. People started calling him the god of Earth. His power became so extreme that he defeated all the other gods and took the title of the most powerful being in the divine realm. But then the story took a twist. Now there was no one left who could challenge him. His days, once full of thrill and excitement, had turned into a never-ending cycle of boredom. To vent his frustration, Moon one day casually lifted his leg and slammed it onto the ground. The divine realm, which was like a mini-planet, shook violently. And that was just the beginning. The entire divine world went into literal earthquake mode. Every god, angel, and even the demons inside trembled in fear. Of course, this wasn't the first time Moon had pulled a stunt like this. But by now, some gods were tired of this kind of daily tremor. One of them was Lucifer, the second most powerful god in the divine realm. Moon, now completely drowning in boredom, behaved as if he didn't care at all about this destruction. His mind was consumed by a single thought. He had defeated every worthy opponent without effort, and now more than 1,000 years had passed since anyone had truly challenged him. Now his heart longed for anyone who could give him a reason to fight again. Letting out a deep breath, Moon muttered to himself, "Being too powerful is a problem too, man." The moment these words left his mouth, something clicked in his mind. After 1,000 years of non-stop frustration, he suddenly felt as if he'd had a genius-level breakthrough. If his strength itself was the problem, then the solution was right in front of him too. He just had to find a way to make himself weak. For him, it was completely obvious. If he took on a body as weak as the people of Earth, he'd have hundreds of rivals to fight. Suddenly, Moon stood up from his seat and shouted loudly, "Dragonling." And then a massive dragon appeared in the sky and landed on the ground with a thunderous crash. Its height was at least 5 times that of Moon's throne. It looked extremely grumpy, as if it didn't like being summoned, but it always looked like that. Its glowing eyes clearly showed that this was the assistant dragon of the top god Liam. The dragon's attitude shifted after a moment, and it asked with a heavy growl, "Why was I called?" But Moon was in a totally chill mood. He casually started walking away and said calmly, "Take care of everything after I leave." But things didn't go as smoothly as Moon had imagined. The dragon suddenly made a bold move. It cast the absolute spell, trying to bind Moon and stop him. But the moment Moon turned his head and gave it a single side glance full of anger, everything changed. The dragon's entire fierce and wild attitude melted away in an instant. It suddenly looked scared and ashamed. Stammering, it tried to justify itself, saying it had no intention of disrespecting him. But Moon at least deserved some explanation, especially since an important meeting of the gods was about to happen shortly. Moon, however, didn't care 2 bits about that meeting. Without saying a word, he kept walking, dragging the dragon along in chains as if nothing had happened. When its first move failed, Liam quickly changed strategy and played the victim card, crying that if Moon didn't attend the meeting, everything would fall on him, and he'd have to endure endless complaints from the other gods. Moon broke the binding spell without any effort, as if it were nothing more than a cobweb. Then he turned toward the dragon and shouted, "I'm not going anywhere if you're ready to fight me right now." That was enough to completely flip Liam's attitude. He realized that enduring the other gods' tantrums was far easier than directly clashing with Moon. He quickly folded his hands and said, "Safe journey, sir. May your travels be short and peaceful." Moon smiled lightly and moved forward toward a floating miniature version of Earth. He reached out and touched its surface. The moment he touched it, a question came to his mind. Whose body should I enter now? To make the decision easier, he began listening to the prayers and messages that Earth's people were sending to the gods. Most of them were completely useless and boring. But then one message caught his attention entirely, a message that questioned his very existence. At first, Moon felt a bit irritated, but soon he realized this was the human whose body he could enter to restart his journey. For the first time in 1,000 years, Moon genuinely felt excitement. He had finally found the ultimate solution to his endless boredom. But while Moon was super happy with his strategy, his assistant didn't look very excited. For a moment, Moon wondered whether he should give some explanation before leaving. But true to his full Sigma personality, he decided there was no need to explain anything. The dragon was a bit confused and shocked when Moon simply said a casual goodbye, left everything in his care, and told him to look after whoever arrived during his ongoing absence. A strange mix of worry and disappointment stirred in the dragon's heart. He finally understood Moon was sending his soul to Earth, leaving his body behind in the divine realm. In a panic, the dragon tried to warn him. If anything happens to your body, your separated soul will die on Earth too. But Moon's mind was already made up. He fully believed that no one in the divine realm would dare touch his body. Who would dare? That was his exact vibe, and in that overconfidence, he believed his body would remain completely safe. The dragon tried to stop him, but only with words. Moon, as always, completely ignored his assistant and did exactly what he felt was right. Without any further explanation, the scene instantly switched. He was no longer Moon. He was now a new person, someone who had just won an intense battle and defeated a demon lord. The feeling of victory was overwhelming, and that person's joy knew no bounds. But this wasn't real life, it was just the final scene of a video game which a 17-year-old loser had just completed moments ago. His name was Lee Ho. A boy who was painfully jealous of every game's protagonist, those lucky heroes who get crazy adventures and always end up with a massive harem of cute girls. Watching the credits roll on screen, Lee sighed, wishing his life could be like that too. Suddenly, Lee dropped his phone. It slipped from his hand and fell from a great height. Within seconds, the phone hit the ground and shattered completely. It was now clear why Lee was standing on the edge of a 3-story building. He had nothing left to live for. He was about to end his life. His body was trembling, covered in wounds. He whispered a bitter goodbye to this cruel and unfair world and jumped. As he fell, the air whipped past him. With tear-filled eyes, Lee shouted, "If there's a god out there somewhere, this is your chance to prove it. Send me to another world." But before his prayer could be answered, he hit the ground. Blood splattered in every direction. His head struck the sidewalk directly. By all logic, Lee should have died right there. But something weird happened. Lee's hand twitched. His chest rose, and he suddenly took a deep breath as if he'd been saved from drowning. He didn't even realize it, but God Moon's soul had taken over his body at lightning speed right before the moment of impact. Now Moon had to feel the pain of Lee's battered, broken body without even understanding what had actually happened. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lee's soul had arrived in the divine realm. He stood there completely stunned. His jaw was practically on the floor. But the real shock wasn't just being in another world. The real shock came when he saw a gigantic dragon standing in front of him, clearly not happy either. But the shock wasn't only Lee's, the dragon was frozen too. It hadn't expected to see a human soul in the divine realm so soon. Just as Lee hadn't expected the first thing he'd see after death to be the glaring eyes of an angry dragon. Now let's rewind a few seconds. Exactly 10 seconds before this chaos, Moon had been standing there with his iconic smug expression, touching the mini-Earth, relaxed and confident. As mentioned before, he had no regrets about leaving his body behind. The dragonling tried everything to warn him, urging him to reconsider. But Moon, reckless as hell as always, blew away all the warnings like dust. Without wasting a second, he sent his soul to Earth and switched it directly with Lee's soul. And just like that, destiny began writing a new story. What happened next, no one could have imagined. The moment Moon's soul entered Lee's body, he immediately understood he was caught in a serious life-and-death situation. There was no time to adjust, no warning. He was in the air, falling at lightning speed. He had less than a second to grasp what was about to happen. And then it happened. Lee's body hit the ground with such brutal force that it was hard to believe a human could survive that kind of impact. It wasn't just a crash, it was pure destruction. Bones shattered. The body bounced into the air like a broken ragdoll and then dropped, completely lifeless. The pain was more intense than anything Moon had experienced in his entire immortal life. But the real problem wasn't the pain, the real shock was the confusion. Why, the moment he set foot on Earth, well, soul, how had all this happened so fast? How had this mess come together so quickly? Nothing made sense. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. His entire battered body was in shock. But then suddenly everything went still. The shaking stopped. In that cold, dead silence, Moon had a horrifying realization: he was dying. No chance to change destiny, no time to fix what was broken. His body simply collapsed onto the cold, merciless ground. Everything felt strangely quiet. No one was around to witness the fall of the once proud and powerful god. No one to help, no one even watching. But no, this was not Moon's end. Not yet. As you know, there are certain muscles in the human body that can't be consciously controlled, like the heart and some internal organs. But Moon, who had spent 30 million years training his body, had surpassed every limit of the human form. His control was so precise that he could consciously control even his blood vessels, muscles, and organs. So within just a few seconds, his heart started beating again. Yes, it hurt insanely, but Moon forcibly circulated blood through his veins, repaired his heart, and stopped the bleeding. Slowly, Moon stood back up as if nothing had happened, even though his body was still screaming in pain. But he wasn't angry. Instead, he was oddly happy. Beaten, bruised, covered in blood, he hadn't felt a sensation this intense in a very long time. And that feeling was enough to confirm to him that he'd made the right decision coming here. Now it was time to explore Lee's memories, to find out what kind of life this boy had lived. Moon didn't take long to understand the whole story, and with that understanding, he planned to head to Lee's house as his new base. But walking there was a problem. Lee's weak, injured legs made it hard to move. So Moon literally started using his hands like a monkey, crawling to keep his balance, and eventually, after some time, he reached Lee's house. The first thing he noticed, a cat had pooped right in front of the window. Great welcome. The house was tiny, almost like a basement. Moon sat down on the squeaky bed and began reflecting on Lee's memories. They revealed that Lee had only one male relative and he lived far away, meaning Lee was completely alone. Poor, helpless, completely pathetic. His only occupation was going to school. The most interesting part for Moon came when he found a school memory, a boy who bullied Lee day and night as if it were his life's mission. Constant fights, humiliation, and pure torture. For Moon, this was the perfect starting point, full of cause, pain, and potential. He couldn't have been more thrilled. In his excitement, Moon threw a random punch in the air and immediately felt a sharp, piercing pain in his arm as if the muscles had torn. Something was definitely wrong. He guessed that maybe he'd overused his arm muscles while crawling earlier. Clearly, this body wasn't trained for any kind of action. Moon noticed that Lee had probably never used his hands for physical work at all. That's why even simple movements were causing pain. But Moon wasn't angry. In fact, he was happy. Feeling this kind of pain again after thousands of years was oddly satisfying. The next day, police found bloodstains and broken glasses at the spot where Lee's body had fallen. They quickly sealed off the area and began an investigation. Meanwhile, Moon casually returned to the crash site, but not to check on the police investigation. The real reason was nearby. The three-story building was Lee's school, and Moon had decided he would continue Lee's daily routine. As soon as he entered the school, he started scanning the hallways until he found Lee's classroom. The moment Moon found it, his excitement was so high that he slammed the sliding door open with full force. The door bounced back and hit him right in the face, ruining his entire victory moment. Stumbling a little, Moon entered the classroom, muttering to himself. His entrance caught the attention of one of Lee's classmates. The boy got irritated by the noise and glared at him angrily, saying, "Idiot Lee Ho, come in quietly." Hearing this, Moon forgot all about his pain and walked straight toward the boy. He stood right in front of him, so close that the boy froze in shock for a moment. But what scared the boy more than Moon's weak body was the creepy smile on his face. In that same moment, Moon got complete clarity. This was the bully who kept appearing in Lee's memories, the one who always made his life miserable. But the bully still had no idea that the Lee standing before him wasn't the same Lee anymore. The bully said mockingly, "What happened, bro? Forgot your glasses today or just in the mood to act stupid?" Before Moon could say anything, the boy suddenly threw a punch straight at Moon's face. The punch was so solid that blood started flowing from Moon's nose and lips onto the floor. The bully laughed sarcastically and taunted again. "Did you sell your glasses for money or lose them like you always do, loser?" But Moon didn't even flinch. He stood completely still. He had his own rules for fighting. A fair and honorable fight only begins once both sides' intent to fight is clear, and he always took the first hit himself to confirm the other person's intent. Now that the punch had landed, a familiar smile spread across Moon's face. Without wasting any time, he threw a powerful punch right in the middle of the bully's sentence. The boy was completely caught off guard. The punch landed with the same intensity Moon had just taken himself. But the moment Moon pulled his hand back, a sharp pain shot through his arm as if the muscles were tearing, a brutal reminder that this was no longer a god's body, but a weak human one. Hearing the noise, the teacher rushed into the classroom, shouting angrily, "Stop fighting right now." But by then, the entire class's eyes were locked on the fight. Everyone watched curiously as this nerdy-looking boy stood up to the bully. It was the bully's first time getting punched by a nerd, and his ego was deeply wounded. Now, full of rage, he charged at Moon, ignoring the teacher and the crowd of classmates. Moon immediately defended himself and managed to block most of the attacks. He was thinking, if this were his real body, this fight would have ended ages ago. He tried to activate his god powers, but they simply weren't working. This realization distracted him, and the very next second he took another punch. It wasn't as painful this time, but the bully wasn't going to stop until Moon regretted everything. On the other hand, Moon realized his situation was getting serious. His punches and kicks weren't landing properly, and on top of that, his god powers had failed completely. He had only one option left. Suddenly, Moon lowered his head, targeting an exact point, and took the incoming punch directly on his skull. His skull was the one part of this body that was somewhat reliable. The moment the bully's fist collided with Moon's head, the impact was so strong that the bully's fingers broke. The pain was so intense that the bully screamed like a crying child. Moon felt like a genius on the inside. Now, taking advantage of the bully's distraction to end the fight, Moon stepped forward himself, grabbed the boy's arm, and suddenly headbutted him hard straight into the stomach or maybe the groin. The bully went into complete shock again, the pain so intense he couldn't recover. But Moon didn't stop there. In one more swift move, he lifted his head and slammed it into the bully's jaw. This time, the bully's eyes rolled back. He dropped to his knees, looking like a completely defeated loser, and then passed out. The whole classroom was stunned. No one moved. Everyone just pulled out their phones, recording the entire fight. The boy considered the weakest in school had taken down the school's biggest bully, something nobody could have imagined. But for Moon, it was something else entirely. For the first time in thousands of years, he had fought with everything he had. The experience was completely surreal. But there was no time to celebrate. As the adrenaline wore off, every injury on his body started hurting all at once. There was a metallic taste of blood in his mouth, and for the first time, even Moon began to feel that maybe enduring all this wasn't so easy. It took just a moment for Moon to realize that, surprisingly, he was enjoying what had happened. After such a long, exhausting journey, feeling this much pain in one solid fight was surprisingly satisfying. Once the excitement settled, Moon kept staring at the unconscious boy's body as if he wasn't quite satisfied yet. Then he sat down beside him, maybe because the boy had given him such a tough fight. Moon said softly, "Thanks," but then something unexpected happened. Moon leaned down, opened his mouth wide, and bit off the boy's ear. Blood splattered everywhere, and Moon didn't just bite it, he literally tore off a small piece of the ear and spat it on the ground right there in front of the entire class. Panic spread through the classroom. No one could believe Moon had actually done that. To everyone, he looked like some kind of psycho. But Moon didn't care about anyone's reaction. He stayed completely calm, wiped the blood off his face, and then stared unblinkingly at the boy who still hadn't regained consciousness. Biting off the bully's ear was Moon's own twisted way of saying thanks, a way of marking someone who gave him a fun fight as part of his list. His must-fight list, but this wasn't humiliation to him, it was recognition. And earning that title was, in his mind, a badge of honor. Ironically, it was something like how humans neuter and mark animals, except the difference was that Moon's method wasn't about humiliation, but about showing respect and power. Soon the story spread through the entire school like wildfire, that the school's biggest second-year bully had been beaten by the weakest boy in school, and beaten so badly that emergency medical help had to be called. Moon watched the ambulance leave along with the rest of the students, but he wasn't concerned about the boy's health. He was just impressed at how quickly help had arrived just from a phone call. As the ambulance left, Moon waved his hand in the air, as if saying goodbye to his first opponent, secretly wishing he'd cross paths with him again someday. Just then, a teacher came up from behind, practically boiling with anger. He told Moon come to the office. As soon as they reached the office, the teacher exploded, shouting, "Have you lost your mind? Why did you do something this wild and crazy to your classmate?" Furious, the teacher picked up a file to hit him with. But Moon didn't flinch even slightly, no fear, no regret, just a faint smile, a hint of excitement on his face as if he were already thinking about his next opponent. Seeing Moon's expression, the teacher froze, his hand stopped midair. He didn't want to risk ending up in the hospital like that other boy, so he skipped the punishment and simply said, "Bring your parents tomorrow." Moon had expected the teacher to hit him, sparking another fight, but when that didn't happen, he dropped the idea and quietly walked out. The teacher allowed him to leave school before the other students. Moon followed the instructions without saying much and headed toward Lee's house. On the way, Moon's mind wandered. Unlike other gods, Moon didn't have full knowledge of this world. He didn't fully understand what leaving early really meant, whether it meant going back to his base or something else. Either way, Moon decided to use this free time to heal and train his body since he knew he'd have more fights ahead in the future. His arm was still trembling with pain. He tried using mana again, that divine energy known across various worlds as Kai or chakra, the life force present everywhere in nature, the one that grants humans superpowers, turning them into hunters, wizards, or gamers in different worlds. But in this world, Moon couldn't rely on mana no matter how hard he tried. He tried again, but the mana vanished within seconds. He remembered the moment during the fight when mana had failed him. Frustration was now at its peak. Moon realized he could now rely only on his physical body. That was his one and only strength. Once he reached Lee's house, Moon collapsed straight onto the bed. He knew recovery would take a long time, and for now there was nothing he could do. So he decided to go back to the realm of the gods for a while to check what was happening there. In an instant, just like when he had entered Earth, his soul returned to his original god body. But the moment Moon regained consciousness, he was met with a shocking scene. Lee Ho was choking a dragonling. The same weak boy who used to get bullied on Earth was now completely confident. Seeing Moon, he let go of the dragon and walked toward him, demanding, "Give me the dragon." Lee had no idea who Moon really was. He assumed this was just some random soul temporarily in this realm who'd leave soon. Lee now wanted to use the dragonling to take control in his new life. Moon absolutely did not like how arrogant and commanding Lee was becoming. Without hesitation, Moon summoned a godly hand and grabbed Lee firmly, making it clear that he couldn't give orders like that to a lord. Lee was completely shocked. He had no idea this would happen, but Moon didn't care about his protests or complaints, and without a second thought, he started dragging him elsewhere. Moon had decided to give this boy a second chance in another world, but the expression on Lee's face suggested something else was going on in his mind. Soon they arrived in the domain of Lucifer, the second-ranked god of the divine realm. Moon entered confidently, his firm steps making it clear exactly why he was there. No one else was present, only Lucifer, who, unlike Moon, paid a lot of attention to his own planet Elmer. Moon marched straight into Lucifer's castle uninvited, as if Lucifer were just an ordinary person. Naturally, Lucifer wasn't pleased with this rude behavior. He didn't even give them a chance to explain and flatly refused, denying whatever they wanted before even hearing it out. But Moon didn't care about Lucifer's opinion at all. He stated flatly that he wanted the gate open because he was going to send Lee to planet Elmer. As expected, Lucifer reminded him that Elmer wasn't his planet, so Moon had no right to do that, but Moon wasn't one to back down. He leaned in slightly and reminded Lucifer exactly who the more powerful god was in this scenario. He made it clear he could do whatever he wanted. To emphasize his point further, Moon added, "If you doubt my power, I'm ready to prove it anytime, anywhere." Poor Lucifer knew he couldn't match Moon, so he trembled in frustration. Seeing Lucifer's hesitation, Moon decided to handle things himself. He walked toward the surface of planet Elmer, and the moment he touched it to detach it, Lucifer was stunned. Lucifer quickly warned him that interfering in another god's domain was strictly forbidden. If an outsider god touched it, an unbreakable barrier would activate. And that's exactly what happened. The moment Moon touched it, a powerful barrier appeared. But Lucifer's disbelief knew no bounds when Moon broke it effortlessly within seconds, something Lucifer never imagined possible. Drowning in shock, Lucifer just stared at Moon, who calmly said, "The rules of the universe only change when someone truly wants to change them." Then Moon opened his godly hand and released Lee, urging him to step forward and jump into the hole created on planet Elmer. Lee hesitated, clearly scared. But Moon reminded him, "This is exactly what you've always wanted, and now the chance is right in front of you." Lee asked Moon once more, "Give me the dragonling so I can dominate in my new life." But Moon made it clear he had no intention of giving up his assistant and directly launched Lee onto planet Elmer. Afterward, Moon thought for a moment, kids these days want everything served on a silver platter. They've completely forgotten how to put in effort themselves. Now that everything was settled, Moon casually looked at Lucifer and said, "Take care of the kid," and walked away. Lucifer, meanwhile, was burning with humiliation and anger, thinking only, "I wish I had the power to tear Moon apart." Lucifer's story wasn't very different from Moon's. He was once history's first demon lord on planet Elmer above every life form. When he claimed the title of the strongest, in his arrogance he challenged his own god. At the start of the battle, Lucifer summoned a blinding light that soon turned into a massive magical sword, many times larger than the god himself. Lucifer hurled it straight at the god. The god couldn't stop it, it split him clean in two, he couldn't even defend himself. After defeating that god, Lucifer took his place, but he wasn't satisfied. He went on to challenge every god in the divine realm, defeating them one by one and seated himself on the ultimate throne. Despite being a demon, he became the god of gods, absolute, invincible, the supreme legend, a name everyone respected, but his glory didn't last long. One day Moon came and defeated him just as easily as he'd crushed everyone else. In front of everyone, Lucifer's mighty image shattered. Burning with humiliation and rage, Lucifer took a vow, "I will take revenge on this human's offspring Moon." Back in the present, Moon was now riding comfortably on his dragonling, heading toward his domain. He had no idea that something in the sky was secretly watching him, a demon, perhaps sent by Lucifer himself, tracking Moon's every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back, just as Lucifer was counting every moment until he could avenge his humiliation. Similarly, the bully from Lee's school, who had just regained consciousness, was also eagerly waiting to see Lee dead. Lying on the hospital bed, the boy picked up his phone and decided he needed to call someone even more powerful to teach Lee a lesson. Burning with anger, he scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he was looking for. On the other side of the city, someone was unleashing all his strength on a punching bag. That boy's name was Cheel, the middleweight boxing champion of the youth division. His intense training session was suddenly interrupted by a loud ringtone. Annoyed, Cheel stopped mid-punch, sweat dripping from his body, and turned to see whose phone was making that annoying noise. Then another boy, a blonde one, casually walked in and said it was his phone. He went and picked it up, answering in an irritated tone. That boy was Cheel, a boxer with 2 years of experience. The caller was none other than the beaten-up bully, whose voice clearly carried desperation. Without any introduction, he told Cheel that if he wanted, he could get him a new phone. He just needed Cheel to do one small task for him. At first, Cheel was a bit surprised by the request, but once he realized the deal was easy and beneficial, he agreed and asked what he'd need to do in return. The next day, everything in class seemed normal until the bully walked in as if nothing had happened. As he made his way to his seat, the entire classroom fell silent for a moment, everyone staring at him. Then slowly the whispers started. Students were murmuring about how pathetic the situation had become for the boy who used to bully everyone. At first he tried to ignore it, but when the whispers turned into jokes about him being neutered, he couldn't take it anymore. To stop himself from becoming a laughingstock, he slammed his bag onto the ground and shouted that he could still beat everyone, even after being neutered. He challenged anyone who doubted his strength. Just then, the class president, a girl who wore glasses, stood up and said loudly, "Either stay quiet or leave the classroom." Hearing a girl talk to him like that only fueled the bully's anger further. He couldn't tolerate the class president standing up to him too. Furious, he grabbed a random chair, about to throw it at the girl to instill fear in everyone again. But at that exact moment, the classroom door burst open and a massive teacher walked in. All the students jumped in surprise, and the bully quickly put the chair down and sat back in his seat as if nothing had happened. The teacher looked around and noticed the class president still standing there, visibly angry. He asked her what had happened and why she was out of her seat. But the girl didn't tell the truth. She quietly returned to her seat and said it was nothing important. The teacher didn't press further, but as he left, he told the girl to meet him after class. Curious about why the teacher wanted to see her alone, she went to meet him after school only to find out the teacher wanted a favor from her. Since she was the class president and someone he could trust, he asked her to go check on Lee, who had been absent that day and wasn't answering his phone. In return, the teacher promised to give her a recommendation letter that would help in her senior year. It felt more like an order than a request, but the girl knew she couldn't refuse. Reluctantly, without saying anything, she agreed. Without wasting much time, she arrived at Lee's house. Her face showed complete disinterest. She didn't care at all about Lee's condition. She just wanted to get this task over with quickly. She knocked on the door and called out to see if anyone was home. When there was no response, she hesitated slightly before turning the doorknob, and surprisingly, the door was unlocked. She stepped inside slowly, and the moment she entered, she froze completely. Lee's body lay there looking completely lifeless. The entire room was filthy with bugs crawling around. Lee's condition was horrifying. His eyes were rolled back and his mouth hung open. Seeing this, the girl screamed in fear, thinking Lee was dead. Without wasting a second, she grabbed her phone and called an ambulance. Paramedics arrived quickly and took Lee to the hospital. The doctors soon understood what had happened. Lee had likely collapsed from pure starvation. God Moon, who had left this body behind, had no one to take care of it after that. He was now admitted to the hospital, put on a nutrient IV to stabilize his condition. Then something strange happened. Lee's body, which had been still until now, suddenly twitched. At that exact moment, Moon's soul returned to Lee's body. The moment Moon opened his eyes, he was completely confused. This place looked entirely unfamiliar to him. Before Moon could process anything, he felt something strange. Looking down, he realized something was attached to his arm, a fourth line delivering nutrient serum into his body. A god who had spent his entire life only in battles and fighting had no knowledge of this era's human tools or technology, and this strange serum was no exception. He stared at it with curiosity and a bit of unease, trying to understand what exactly was happening. Even though he had no idea what the serum was, like a true god, he instantly understood that this thing was sending something into his body and doing so through his vessels. With his godly senses, he could clearly feel his body rapidly absorbing the nutrients, which was making his recovery incredibly fast. It felt to Moon like some kind of healing magic was happening, even though he knew very well it wasn't actually magic. As Lee, or rather Moon and Lee's body, slowly began to stir and regain consciousness, the girl sitting nearby noticed he had woken up. But seeing that strange, creepy smile on his face, she felt like this boy might be a little crazy. Still, she asked, "Do you remember what happened to you?" But without waiting for an answer, she quickly grabbed her bag and stood up, saying, "I'm going back to school to report everything to the teacher, just like you asked." Moon immediately sat up and tried to stop her. He didn't quite know who this girl was, but he assumed she was probably the one who had helped him recover so quickly. But in typical Moon style, instead of saying thanks, he asked for something else entirely. The girl was in a hurry to leave, but Moon wanted to know more about Earth and the lives of the people here. He pulled the IV from his palm, gave that same creepy smile, and asked, "Do you know any place where I can get strong, where I can train?" The girl tilted her head slightly and gave him a sideways glance. Honestly, in her eyes, this boy didn't look like an athlete at all. And looking at his messy, broken-down house, it definitely didn't seem like he had any interest in sports. Still, after thinking for a moment, she suggested a place, nothing fancy, just a simple outdoor gym nearby in the park with basic workout equipment. Moon didn't waste any time and headed straight to the park. He quickly started doing pull-ups, pushing his body with full force. After tiring out, he collapsed onto the ground to catch his breath. His sweat-drenched body looked around at everything. Moon was impressed. To him, these simple exercise tools felt no less than advanced professional training gear. It had been almost 4,000 years since he'd last come to Earth, and he hadn't paid attention to human progress since then. From the perspective of an Earth god, even these basic machines felt revolutionary to him. In his time, people trained using very different primitive methods that were not only harder but also far less effective. Now Moon randomly began trying out every piece of equipment, even though he had no idea about their exact use. Just then, during his training, something small hit him from behind and fell to the ground, a small stone. He turned around and was shocked to see the beaten-up bully standing there, and this time he wasn't alone. He had brought a boxer with him named Cheel. The bully started insulting Moon from a distance, barking like a cowardly dog too scared to approach directly. Moon didn't care at all about his words. Calmly, he picked up the stone that had been thrown and asked, "Who threw this?" The beaten-up boy, now feeling a bit bolder because Cheel was with him, shouted back, "I threw it." Then he started rambling about how Lee would have to pay for what he'd done, and how his cousin Cheel, a professional boxer, would kill him. But before he could finish talking, Moon saw his chance and suddenly threw a punch. The boy fell to the ground, screaming in pain as his already broken nose broke again. That was the price of throwing a stone at a god, and Moon only got more excited because of it. All of this was happening on Earth, but in the realm of the gods, the situation was even more intense. The regular meeting of the gods was about to take place, but Moon didn't show up. Instead, his lone assistant, the dragonling, arrived there alone. Nervously, the little dragon began reading the message aloud, but he had barely spoken a few words when Lucifer interrupted him. Looking at him with anger, he said, "How dare a mere mayor's assistant come into a meeting of gods and speak first?" Lucifer's intimidating presence scared poor Dragonling. In a panic, he clarified, "I am only here to deliver Mew's message. I have no intention of disrespect or insult." Scared but determined, Dragonling began reading the letter in a trembling voice, but the message was nothing special. It was the usual thing. Mew was telling the other gods that if they found a worthy opponent, they should inform him so he could fight them. Hearing this, Lucifer's anger burst out. He slammed his hand hard on the table. Being the second most powerful god of the divine realm, he could not tolerate that Mew not only did everything on his own terms but was now ignoring the gods' meeting as well. Technically, he was not wrong, and most of the gods were secretly agreeing with him too, but no one had the courage to openly criticize Mew. Lucifer said loudly again, "These gods' meetings happen so that we can maintain the safety and stability of our worlds." But for Mew, everything seems like a game, and that is his biggest problem. Just then the third most powerful god, the Archer god, also put forward his point. He said, "If something abnormal is happening on Earth, the responsibility is ours, not Mew's." And this statement was unacceptable for Mew, the strongest god. Lucifer seized the moment and slammed the table again, this time even harder. Mew's habit of treating everything like a game is now pushing all the worlds to the edge of collapse. In Lucifer's view, every time Mew had tried to solve a problem, the situation had gotten worse. To make his point more solid, Lucifer looked toward Cyclops God, the ninth-ranked deity of the divine realm, and asked if he remembered the incident that happened 1,000 years ago when the Cyclops planet was on the edge of destruction. At that time, a terrifying and massive creature the size of an entire planet had attacked the Cyclops planet. It was no ordinary creature. It was a rare void creature that could swallow an entire planet in a matter of seconds. And just as that creature began tearing the planet apart, something passed straight through the middle of its body. It split it into two equal halves. That something was none other than God Mew himself, with his usual happy and flushed face. Getting the chance to fight, Mew had finished off that joint creature in a single blow. Lucifer used this story to make the point that the aftermath of the destruction was solely because of Mew. He explained that if Mew had worked together with the other gods instead of acting solo, there would not have been so much devastation. After making his full case and perhaps pulling the other gods to his side, Lucifer declared, "No more. A human who is not even worthy of being a god, giving him more chances is playing with the safety of their world." On the other side, Dragon Ling was completely in shock. He could neither do anything nor say anything. He was just silently praying to his god, "Please come back before everything gets even worse." The scene cuts to Earth where that beaten boy starts mouthing off again. He shouts at Mew, "I will call my boxer cousin. He will take revenge on you for what you did." Chial, that very boxer cousin, upon hearing this, became a little intrigued. Watching Mew's movement and punch speed, he was even a little impressed for a moment. Curious, he asked, "Do you do martial arts or any sport?" But Mew replied casually, "I don't play any sport, I just like to fight, not play." Hearing this answer, Chial took him as an overconfident, stupid middle schooler. He spat out his chewing gum and smirking took a fighting stance. "All right, let's start the way you wanted." Chial made the first move. He stepped forward quickly to test Mew. His first punch was fast and accurate. It landed straight on Mew's face. Mew had no time to dodge or block, but the reaction he got shook Chial from inside. Being an experienced boxer, Chial observes every movement. And he found it completely abnormal that even though Mew had seen the punch coming, he did not move at all. Just like the beaten boy who had hired Chial, he too had no idea that Mew was not a human but a god. And not just any god, but one who was crazy about fighting. Chial also had no idea that Mew never avoids a preemptive strike. For him, taking the first hit is a signal. The fight has begun. With his copy green, Mew shouted, "Is hand-to-hand combat your favorite thing too?" Seeing his scary smile and strange behavior, Chial began to wonder, is this kid some kind of psycho teenager? Then suddenly Mew copied Chial's fighting stance and jumped straight at him. Chial thought this was just a dumb copycat move. He comfortably blocked Mew's punch, or at least he thought he did. In reality, the force of Mew's punch slid him backward. His hand trembled with pain. He was surprised himself at how a guy who looked so weak could have so much strength. Mew's face was now looking even more excited. He was genuinely enjoying his own power. But he knew his current body was still weak. It could not be fully relied upon. When he tensed all his muscles while throwing the punch, after the impact his hand's muscles screamed, as if saying, "Bro, need rest." But Mew did not care. The pain gave him even more pleasure. For him, this was a real fight, the thrill that he did not even get in his god form. Chial was still confused when Mew took off his belt and wrapped it around his hand. He knew his current body was fragile and would take time to recover, so this smart move could protect him. The beaten boy watching all this from the sidelines started shouting, "Using a belt is unfair." But obviously neither Mew nor Chial cared at all about his opinion. Chial attacked again. This time more seriously, he threw continuous punches, left, right, non-stop. Mew blocked most of the punches, but his body was quite limited due to the pain. Chial's attack was very aggressive. While defending, Mew began analyzing the opponent's style. He understood that Chial was fast and accurate but also very predictable. In a short time, Mew began anticipating his every move. When Chial tried to surprise him, Mew not only blocked his punch but punched his arm mid-swing. Chial could not understand anything at all. Within just a few seconds, his hand was broken. He screamed in pain and Mew just watched him silently as if amused by his condition. Hearing the scream, Mew got a little confused. He wondered if Chial and that guy from Lee's class were cousins. Both of their overdramatic behaviors seemed similar. But Mew did not waste more time. He threw another sudden punch and knocked out the distracted Chial. For a little while everything went quiet and that friend or cousin or whoever it was just stood there, completely stunned. And then Mew's face slowly began to change. A terrifying, excited expression. His whole face began to glow as if lit up by the excitement of the fight. He declared, now the time has come to settle the score for all those problems, especially because this is not the first time you people have messed with me. That boy who was earlier very arrogant, now he understood completely. Chial was out of the fight and there was nobody left to save him. His painful end was now certain and there was no way left for him to escape. Mew slowly moved toward Lee's classmate to finish the score of today's fight. As he got close, he realized that the one in front was no longer in any condition to fight. But Mew did not care because this was the very boy who had thrown a stone and started the fight and had called the boxer. Without showing any mercy, Mew beat him mercilessly, tried his new copy techniques one by one and finally finished him off with a powerful knee strike. Mew felt satisfied now, but there was a question in his mind, why doesn't this boy give up? Then he figured it out himself. He had not given him the chance to give up at all. Mew had left his mark on the boxer too, and leaving both of them behind, he moved on. Going back to Lee's house, he sat on the bed, happy that everything was going according to his plan. But his weak body and fragile bones started troubling him again. So he decided that he would now go to the God Realm to see what was happening there and pick up the thing he had ordered from Dragon Ling. He tried the soul transfer, but this time nothing happened. He opened his eyes and saw he was still in Lee's house. He could not understand why he was not able to go back to his real body. What had happened in the God Realm had begun in Lucifer's domain. A few days ago, Mew had forcibly thrown Lee onto Elmer's planet without Lucifer's permission. We already know that on that day Mew had completely ignored Lucifer. Without caring about his opinion, Mew had come and done whatever he wanted and left. But he had no idea that his actions were pushing Lucifer to his limits. When Mew was returning to his domain, Dragon Ling had asked him about the Earth journey. Mew excitedly told him how much he had enjoyed that trip, but also mentioned that his new body was feeling quite weak on Earth. In the same conversation, Mew had ordered his assistant to find a recovery magic orb, thinking that maybe this would help his body recover faster. But there was a small problem. On Elmer and some other planets, magic items were common because there was no shortage of mana there. But on Earth it was not like that. Their magical objects were only available through divine blessings or the will of the gods. Because of this, they were very rare. That is why throughout all of human history, only a handful of people were those who could naturally use them, and such people would become godlike for humans. When Mew returned to his domain, Dragon Ling promised that the next time he came to the God Realm, the magic orb would be ready for him. Just as Mew stepped down from Dragon Ling, his assistant gave him a reminder about the upcoming gods meeting. Mew casually put his hand in his pants pocket and said he had prepared something for it. The assistant was disbelieving due to the repeated complaints, but it was not any big gift. Just a small letter, and we already know what was written in that letter. Having delivered his message and fulfilled his responsibility, Mew went straight to that miniature Earth model and placed his hand on its surface to go back into Lee's body. Dragon Ling, who was already annoyed, still kept trying to stop him. At least attend the meeting. But Mew ignored his words again and sent his soul back to Earth. They did not even know that a small demon was hovering in the sky. Silently observing, reporting every single move of Mew to his biggest enemy. The scene shifts back to the present where Lucifer was analyzing the entire matter. He had absolutely no idea what Mew was going to do. But he did know one thing, that his body was empty right now without a soul. Mew's absence from the meeting convinced Lucifer that he would not be in the God Realm for some time. And just then Lucifer realized this was the moment. A once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity to take revenge. And this chance he could not miss under any circumstances. Without giving any warning, Lucifer suddenly activated his spell. As the spell activated, sharp purple lightning bolts that looked like spears fell upon Dragon Ling, but Dragon Ling's senses were sharp. He jumped back at the last moment and avoided every single spear. His expression, which was earlier awkward and embarrassed, was now completely serious and ready for battle. He asked angrily, "What is all this? Are you truly declaring war against Mew, the god of Earth?" Lucifer was now feeling confident. He knew Mew would not interfere. He floated slowly in the air and spoke. "I will remove Mew from his seat of divinity myself." And this was his official declaration of war. Dragon Ling, without wasting any time, compressed his fiery breath and released a deadly flame blast that went toward Lucifer like a laser. Initially, it seemed like Lucifer was caught off guard, but he dodged it with great ease. Surprisingly, that flame did not dissipate. It spun and went to the other side of the god's planet-like realm and exploded. The explosion was so intense that the archer god had to quickly create a magical shield, first to protect himself and then the rest of the gods. The other gods got scared, but Lucifer did not move even an inch. Neither frightened nor fled nor created a shield. The flames and shock waves spread all around like a nuclear blast, but no damage was done. Dragon Ling realized that his first deadly move was completely useless. Now he activated his ultimate move, Polymorph Release. His entire body began to change form. Wild red lightning crackled all around him and an intense aura surrounded him, to show how serious he was about his master's protection, but Lucifer was still unaffected. In fact, he smirked and said, "I will deal with you the same way I deal with Mew's little girl." Then it is Mew's turn, for the punishment he gave me. Dragon made it clear he would do anything to protect his master, but things did not go his way. Mew's royal assistant, that is Dragon Ling, lost badly to Lucifer. He got trapped in Lucifer's life taxidermy spell, could neither move nor do anything. His entire body was badly injured. Archer God took a long breath and casually said the place was no longer suitable for a proper godly meeting and walked away. The rest of the gods stood there stunned. Seeing this terrifying fight between Lucifer and Dragon Ling, everyone was frozen with fear. No one was even moving. Helping was out of the question. Archer God's quiet departure did not go unnoticed by Lucifer. Suddenly Lucifer called out to him and with a sharp gaze put a straight question. "Whose side are you on, in support of the expulsion or against it?" But Archer God